somebody in maybe the psychology realm may label me as like schizophrenic or some clinical diagnosis that hears voices, but that is my religious spiritual practice, and me reading the Bible and having a relationship with God, something was changing inside of me that I cannot fully explain.
Thank you guys for stopping by. We're going to discuss conversion therapy, Sam Brinton, and we've got two guests here today. Daniel, thanks for coming on our show.
It's good to be here.
Wayne Blakely, thanks for coming on our show. Both these guys, we wanted them to give a little bit of a perspective on this topic because Sam Brinton is really an interesting character. And like you said, his job is to get rid of nuclear waste in the Biden administration. And he's really the leading voice with conversion therapy, why it's dangerous and all this stuff. So let's check out a video just so you get a context of what conversion therapy really is. Here's kind of what some people say is wrong with conversion therapy.
Right now in New Hampshire, there's a bill that's advancing through the state legislature that looks to repeal the ban on conversion therapy for LGBTQ plus kids. The practice of trying to change someone's sexual orientation is banned in 20 states because of the higher rates of suicide among those who go through this, in heavy quotes here, treatment.
So who's ready? Welcome to the Refuge program. Come on.
I'm Garrett Conley. I'm the author of Boy Erased, now a major motion picture. Boy Erased is the story of my going into conversion therapy after being outed to my parents and the psychological torture that I endured while I was there.
You cannot be born gay.
Conversion therapy isn't actually therapy. It's abuse. And the unfortunate truth is, conversion therapy happens in the UK. And even worse, it's still legal. Imagine the outrage if people across the country were subjecting their straight relatives to abuse with the aim of them ignoring or betraying their heterosexual orientation and cisgender identities. Almost 1 in 5 LGBT plus people in the UK have experienced someone trying to change, cure, or suppress their sexual orientation or gender identity.
So what do you guys see out of a video like this?
To be honest, my initial reaction is they do a really good job at just in a way manipulating people to think that they can't have any way out of the LGBT culture. I'm speaking as someone who has left that culture myself. And oftentimes, like in the community, we say, or I've heard it being said, that sexuality is like a spectrum. So if that's the case, then why couldn't somebody want to leave that? And I think there is a lot of questions and a lot of harm that has been done within the LGBT community for people who want to change their sexuality, maybe have been unsuccessful and have been abused in the midst of that. But I don't understand their version of that definition of conversion therapy. They make it seem very, like it's only very abusive and there's absolutely no way out. It's kind of my initial reaction.
They paint a pretty grim picture of anybody that wants to change, that it's abuse and evil and, it's
scary.
Like, yeah.
I lived in LGBT culture because actually the church wasn't having this conversation back 100 years ago when I was born. And lived in that culture for 40 years. And then I had organically a relationship with Jesus Christ that I was like, I don't think I really want to live this way anymore because I know what the Bible says. And I believe that God is real and that he has ideals and direction for my life that maybe I didn't quite understand when I was younger. And so I was converted. I came back into, through the Holy Spirit. Nobody came to me, no plan, no therapy, no nothing other than God speaking to me. But when I came back into a religious environment, I began to hear from the LGBT community about conversion therapy. Before that, I hadn't really heard anything. And I began to hear, like, they're trying to make you heterosexual. And boy, I became the defender for the LGBT community. Like, this church isn't trying to do that. We just want you to have a relationship with Jesus. And then I began to dig, and so I've been in ministry for 14 years now. A year and a half ago, I started looking at this topic of conversion therapy. And so I think this program is really apropos to having someone make up their own mind about what they think about it.
I kind of see this topic as being like, there's a variety of ways that people discipline their children, okay? Some people believe in spanking, some people believe in just, time out, sit down over there, right? And I'm sure some people are very abusive in their disciplinary actions towards their children. But you would think that it would be crazy to say, well, because this one person over here is abusive to their children, you should never discipline your kids. And that's, to me, is like what's going on here. It's like, if there is someone that is mistreating the treatment aspect and abusing people, to close the door for anybody that wants to come out and wants to have a change in their heart, that to me is only a one-way street.
Yeah, so here's an interesting fact about conversion therapy. You don't go to a state or a federal accredited institution to become a conversion therapist. And so there's no real definition on conversion therapy. It's a circular definition. It just depends on who you're talking to. Because it used to be thought that we're going to talk about some of those things today, about shock therapy and needle pokes and things like that. Whereas now, the LGBT community has taken that, but then they've also included that if I want to pray for somebody that's asking for my prayers, that's also considered conversion therapy, and that they want to put me in jail for that.
Yeah. In 31 countries around the world, it's illegal to, or I should say it can be criminal to try and change people. 20 states in the United States right now currently have laws that are making it could be criminal for literally trying to change somebody's mind about what they are. So one of the characters that we are discussing here is this character, Sam Brinton. And he's actually part of this whole Trevor project, where if you make a video that deals with talking, discussing, having a testimony or anything about anyone that's lived in the LGBT community, the algorithm on YouTube will flag your video and they'll put a label underneath your video. In fact, we have a video, ironically with Wayne, that has that. So as you can see, our other videos don't have this bar, but this particular one does.
Right, so it's kind of a controlled environment, and it's like, well, who has the power to control that environment? Which makes it kind of a one-way conversation, and it starts degrading the freedoms of America. Free speech was something that fell under our First Amendment rights.
Yeah. So this particular character, Sam Brinton, he's kind of making the news a lot lately. He is was part of the Biden administration. His specific job was to deal with nuclear waste, but that's not what's getting him a lot of attention right now. He has been a vocal voice for advocating LGBT rights, but then also he has gotten caught stealing luggage and in the airports and wearing the dresses and things like that. So this is who we kind of want to discuss, but listen to how he just makes a blanket statement why conversion therapy is evil.
The issue is clear. Harming children is bad. Conversion therapy harms children. Stop conversion therapy.
Whoa.
There's not enough information about what conversion therapy is, and I mean, as a Christian and with my own walk with God, honestly, I also didn't see a therapist or someone to change my sexuality or anything like that. It was literally my relationship with God and hearing the Holy Spirit convict me. Somebody in maybe the psychology realm may label me as like schizophrenic or some clinical diagnosis that hears voices, but that is my religious spiritual practice, and me reading the Bible and having a relationship with God, something was changing inside of me that I cannot fully explain. And there's just not enough information about what conversion therapy is. Like in my experience, my context, my experience would have been labeled conversion therapy. But I did not receive any abuse. I am not psychologically damaged. I have been set free. I have peace now. am in a much better place. I'm more confident. I reaped the benefits of, I guess, in a way, like Jesus transforming me and giving me what I really needed over time. It wasn't like, for me, it wasn't like bada bing, bada boom, you're straight now.
Right.
I don't claim that.
Right.
But temptation isn't sin. I mean, temptation isn't sin. And God came, Jesus came to deliver us from sin and to save us from that, because in and of ourselves, we can't do that on our own. So I'm not trying to preach, but that's just kind of what's on my heart.
No,
So-
preach.
Yeah, and I think too that, you know, if somebody's not interested in being led by the Holy Spirit or believing what the Bible says, I respect that. I totally respect that. Jesus isn't a God of force. He's a God of invitation. And so I wouldn't want to force you into anything. But it's interesting to me that those who are not interested in that point of view want to force you into their point of view, of which I want to choose not to be. I don't want to be a part of that. I care about you very much as an individual. I may, even love you a great deal as a close friend, and a close friend may even say, hey, Wayne, I don't believe this Jesus stuff that you're part of. Okay. And, I'm not really crazy about the fact that you're intimate with somebody of the same gender, but I love you anyway. And so we've had the freedom, and that's why everybody wants to come to America, is because we have the freedom to walk independently. Mm-hmm. This changes that.
Yes, it does. We need some specifics.
Right. He's linking with, to harm children is bad, conversion therapy is bad, so therefore I'm going to stop conversion therapy. And that to me is just way too simplified of a blanket statement over this topic, because
when we really don't even know what conversion therapy is at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
So we need to define that.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm really curious about is why there's such a resistance to change.
Because if they change, I believe that it speaks to what their whole argument is upholding is, I was born this way. This is not a choice for me.
So it's a pride thing.
Yeah, and so if you have the
Human
choice.
Yeah, it is, literally.
That's true. If you have a choice to change, then all of a sudden that argument falls on the floor.
Yeah, and it legitimizes the idea that to be different than how they feel they are is saying, well, now you're really saying that I'm not, I'm not normal, I'm demented, or, but that's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
I'm not making that judgment. I'm saying, but
Exactly.
for me, I lived that way, and actually I didn't find the peace, the joy in that community that I maybe had hoped in finding. But I find that in a relationship with Jesus Christ, so I want to go in that direction.
This next clip is Sam Brinton is telling the story of his own quote unquotes, and I put it in quotes because he's basically saying he was abused with conversion therapy. Here's what he says.
So I'm Samuel Brinton, and I'm from Perry, Iowa. I grew up the son of Southern Baptist missionaries, and we were living on a mission base. So a lot of missionary families living together. And the way I like to say it is that sin entered the building. A playboy got onto the campus, and so of course all of the middle school boys my age, it was perfect because we'd been limited to like censored PBS for most of our lives. It was, heavenly. And I thought myself so righteous because it didn't affect me at all. I went up to my dad and I said, Dad, and of course telling on the others because I was so wonderful and it didn't hurt me. And telling them, I said, but it's really weird. I didn't get the same feelings. I said, I have those feelings when I think of Dale, my best friend. My dad just started punching. That was the first day that I was sent to the emergency room because I'd fallen down the stairs. I was sent to the emergency room about 6 more times for falling down the stairs or tripping on the sidewalk. I'm in this constant state of fear. My mom finally starts recognizing, you know what? Hitting him might not be working. So let's try therapy. And it started with the first few weeks. I had AIDS. I was the only gay person left in the world because the government found all the other gays and killed them as children. If they found me, they would kill me. It's the perfect way to keep a child or a teen from coming out. And we moved on to physical therapy. Physical therapy was my hands being tied down and blocks of ice being placed on my hands. Then pictures of men holding hands would be shown to me, so that way I would associate the concept of the pain of ice with a man touching me. It worked really, really, really well. My dad could barely even hug me anymore when I would scream out in pain.
I'm confused about the killing all the gays in the world. Like,
not
I think
the
it's
only
a
one.
lie that they told him to believe so he
okay.
wouldn't be gay anymore.
So
and
these are types of therapies that he got.
or strategies,
Strategies,
interventions
okay.
that they had him do so he would no longer be gay. And I would agree that that was abusive, the physical abuse, the psychological abuse. But we haven't teased out what conversion therapy is in a definition.
Right.
Those things are constituted as abuse. I think those things should be processed. And as someone that is a therapist, I do see people and I do treat that. So in my clinical mindset, that is something that could be discussed, but that isn't necessarily around, it is around his sexuality, but we're not really trying to change his sexuality. That's something that I think is a separate issue that should have been addressed in therapy. And I would agree that that was pretty abusive. I mean, it was.
Yep. But as the narrative runs, when you're trying to campaign for people to come together in the masses when you're a minority, is the truth actually being trolled surrounding this? And you might have some answers on that.
Well, this is where the rubber really meets the road. I think none of us are going to disagree with that's not right.
Right.
If you're treated like that, that's not right. I don't care what
that is
side of the
abuse.
fence you're on. Nobody should be being abused.
Yeah.
That we can all agree on.
Yeah.
So that really begs the question, if this happened to him, that's a terrible thing, but you can't all of a sudden make a blatant statement that everybody who's trying to convert is doing that.
Exactly.
And that's what they're saying. So we're going to explore, actually, is he telling the truth? That's what we're going to look at. So there's actually some psychologists that have analyzed him and really dug to the bottom of some of these claims that he has. And it seems like the more, as you can tell, he was quite young in that first image, the more he's gone down the road and become a stronger and stronger advocate for anti-change therapy kind of stuff, his stories become more and more fantastical. Watch this story.
And that would begin my conversion therapy experience. It ranged from me being told that I was the only gay left in the world, that the government had come through and killed off every other single gay in the entire globe, and that somehow myself and a few others would every once in a while get through, but that with enough work, it'd be okay. Imagine again where I've lived. I've lived in places where the government coming through and killing off a group of people, totally normalized. I'd watch people shot right in front of me. Like that was a part of my childhood. So the government coming through and killing people, sure. Like obviously that's something that could happen.
Okay.
So he's adding amounts of detail here. That's not normal upbringing, and especially if he's coming from a Christian home, the government doesn't run around and just execute people in.
That would have made a pretty
Was
huge
he in a
puzzle.
low-income community though? Because to some degree, that is some people's reality. If you grew up in a low-income
But
community.
it's not necessarily the government rolling in and the military is just executing people in the
Knocking
streets.
Right,
people
right.
out.
Unless he could synonymously be saying police.
Right. So I could
Or
understand.
neighbors or random people in the community that are also unsafe.
Exactly. You live on the east side of Los Angeles, you're going to see some probably people killed in front of you, but it's not the government coming.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that he's kind of having this perspective. So this next lady, she is a behavioral scientist that analyzes people's behavior. And in fact, she has been called in on some very high profile cases. She has analyzed Michael Jackson in the Michael Jackson case. So these kind of people will analyze a situation. It's not admittable evidence that you can actually be tried and convicted on. But
It's like a polygraph.
Yeah, it's like a polygraph. What it does is it gives the jury a good barometer for how truthful is this person actually being. So she was tasked with the task to watch Sam Brinton and all of his videos. So you've got tons of videos online. So listen to what she has to say about this.
And what I found is that there were multiple areas within each one of those categories I spoke about, like the heating the coils, where when we ran it through voice stress analysis, when he would mention, then it went on to heat and coils. He would use, then it would go into heat and coils rather than, and then he would put heat and coil. So now he's talking in future tense versus past tense. And he's now talking about this heated coil. So I'm looking to see if he's using gestures to show that when that happened, and then looking at his facial expressions, is he showing any sort of pain or suffering, anxiety, fear, sadness. I'm looking for expressions that would correlate with that experience being a very painful experience. So what we found is that when he would speak about like the heat and the coils on his hands, the stress analysis just went crazy. So when he would talk about certain areas that he say that happened, based on his baseline and his vocal tremors, it was off the chart. So then you look at the language, and he was speaking about something like that occurred in present tense versus past tense. There you go, another one. Then you're looking at his behavior, and his facial expressions are not showing or emoting the appropriate expression that one would have given that type of an experience that he had. And we went all the way down the list, from the shock therapy to the needles in his fingers, and over and over and over again, it was deceptive in multiple areas.
So that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are I think, real scientific analyses of people's behavior that I think are very correct. They see patterns, and if they trigger enough of these patterns, these kind of people can easily tell this person is not acting like most people would act when they're telling a story of such importance in their life.
It's almost like a Jim Jones thing where you're duping people. If you're charismatic enough, or you have a fantastic story, and you have viewers who are looking for sensationalism and they start buying into it, well, you get a following then.
Yeah, she actually mentioned that there is sort of this evil smile that you get when you think people are buying your lie. And he was exuding that evil smile, and that was apparently a trigger for her as well. So
I was wondering why he didn't look remorseful when he was sharing that stuff, because I know I haven't experienced abuse like that, but even like the little things I've experienced in my own testimony, like I start tearing up.
Right.
So it's just like,
It's
for something
painful
to
to
be
go back
that
there,
traumatic. And I was like, I know some people don't always express their emotions well, but you can kind of tell in the way they tell it that it's painful.
have you ever seen anybody die in front of you? Have you?
I have.
And what was that like?
Well, I was in a convalescent home, and so they were,
So it was expected.
Yeah.
But not unexpected
No.
death. Somebody was executed or shot in front of you. I had not seen the person get shot, but I saw the person shortly after they got shot. And I'll tell you what, it was enough to make me move. I actually ended up moving because I was in the wrong side of LA, living down there.
Wow.
So you would not candidly talk about that. I've seen people shot every day. And, I really like lemon meringue pie. Really good. Like, you just would never act like that. The way he's throwing those sentences away is not normal. So this kind of behavior has come to the level where his parents have made public statements and said he's not telling the truth. None of this has happened. So here's a whole article right here that talks about his family members even calling him out as none of this has ever happened.
Their younger sister, Rachel Brinton, disputed the abuse accusations to the New York Post, saying their family never physically abused her or his siblings. Quote, "First of all, the claims of conversion therapy never happened, nor did my parents abuse my brother or I," she said. Brinton's mother, Peggy Jo, also says she never sent Sam to conversion therapy. Quote, "And that's pretty much the only comment I can give on that, because he needs to tell his own story." End quote. Peggy Jo said, misgendering her eldest child. Brinton's mother doubled down and said the physical abuse claims are lies. If he had been in an emergency room at any time, there would be records, and there are none, she told the Post.
So this is true. When you start telling stories like that, especially with like what we saw from him in the beginning, he said he went to the emergency room. Anybody that goes to the emergency room, there's a physical record of you walking in that door, and that's never been produced.
And we live in a world where they pull up receipts.
Yes,
from like 5 years ago.
That's right. So this is kind of the picture that's being painted. And, clearly Sam Brinton, has some challenges. You can see the way that he presents himself, and, he's very angry towards anybody that wants to change out of that lifestyle.
Pretty intellectual too. Let's remember he went to MIT. And so it's not like he doesn't have an intellect about him, but that it's how you use that intellect that you can fabricate stories. And then beyond that, when he started popping up in the news lately, I'm a little concerned about the fact that the Joe Biden administration didn't do their homework before they put somebody in a role that they put him in that has security clearances. And then this guy turns around and he starts doing weird things in airports, which I think you have some, another clip as it relates to that. But it's very strange what he does to support his habit of being referred to as they and them, and dressing as a woman now, and the extent that he'll go to obtain the clothing for that.
Yes. So this is a news clip of Tucker Carlson talking about Sam Brinton getting caught stealing luggage, and it wasn't his first offense.
It's only March. We're going to go ahead and just declare this the best story of the year. So we told you about a Tanzanian fashion designer who was watching Fox News coverage of Sam Brinton. That would be Joe Biden's non-binary cross-dressing nuclear waste expert who stole luggage off carousels as part of his fetish. So this designer, Asiya Alkag, noticed that Sam Brinton was wearing one of her dresses. And we thought, how great would it be to track down this Tanzanian designer to tell her story? And we have. She joins us now with her husband, Kamsin. Asiya, thank you so much. Kamsin, thank you. Asiya, will you tell us what happened? How did you notice that it was your dress?
I flew from Houston to Washington, D.C. on March 9th, 2018. When I arrived in DCA, one of my bags was missing. I opened the claim to Delta office in DCA, and I made a police report in DCA airport, but my bag was not found. On December 2022, we saw on the Fox News about Sam Brinton luggage issue, and saw my custom-made designs word by Sam Brinton, which was in the missing bag back 2018. Oh my God, I was shocked. For more than 40 years, I worked hard.
They had the receipt, they had the timestamp. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in.
And the fact that this lady was watching TV and goes, that's my outfit.
Which is one of a kind.
The one I lost.
Designer.
I mean, that is beyond, like, it's not even something that you would ever consider people would do.
I watched another program, and she was going to a fashion expo, and the clothing was in the suitcases, and the suitcase was gone, and she's like, I was just devastated that I couldn't be part of this, fashion expose. And so you can imagine, years later when she's watching television, seeing somebody wearing what she designed.
I mean, it's just really, I believe, speaks to, here's somebody that I think, has a few challenges, is being honest.
Maybe some therapy would be okay.
You know what I mean? And maybe perhaps you feel like you're a bit above the law, or who knows, you work for the government, you get overly confident, I don't know. But this was enough for him to lose his position, right?
Yeah.
He's no longer, I think, working for the Biden administration. In fact, they canned him because of this.
Yeah.
Do you really believe that they didn't do their background check on him? Because I feel like when you're working for something like that, they do their homework. I think maybe what they probably saw was how charismatic he was, and how he was able to sell a story.
Yeah, and the Biden administration has been a big proponent for the LGBT agenda, and he's been willing, he told them even in his campaign that he'd be basically willing to do anything for the LGBT community. And so there are people in places like Rachel Levine, who is the transgender who holds office, and then Sam Brinton was the second person to help bring in this indoctrination into our government.
Yeah. So moving on, this is a particular legislative body in Oregon, and what we're going to hear from is, I believe she's a psychiatrist, right? Or psychologist?
Yeah, a mental health specialist.
She's a mental health specialist, and they're coming before the legislation body and saying, please don't vote that conversion therapy cannot be allowed. And so she's going to give reasons why this is a bad idea if you prevent people from being able to even have a discussion if they want to change. It's like now we're dealing with children who are coming to the table and saying, you know, I feel like I'm this sex, or I feel like I'm this, and rather than helping them navigate that waters, they're affirming them and then doing very drastic things to them, like beginning to mutilate their bodies and things like that.
So the conversion therapy broad stroke by the LGBT plus community is so inclusive that it's excluding people who really need to have therapy for trauma events. Or, I mean, go and get the people that are doing, you know, shock therapy, which is not being done, or who are beating their children, or whatever the case may be. But let's not all throw that under the broad range of conversion therapy. And she's talking about real life situations that are really hurting people that need help.
And her reasoning is pretty clear on this. Watch this clip.
My name is Stephanie Nguyen. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with 10 years of experience counseling a diverse array of individuals and families. I share in your goal of protecting gay, gender atypical, and otherwise vulnerable young people from abuses at the hands of professionals who are supposed to help them. But the current, as well as the proposed legislation, does not achieve its intended purpose. In fact, it does the opposite, creating medical malpractice victims and depriving families in crisis of proper care. Detransitioners are a uniquely traumatized and rapidly growing population with complex needs. One of their most common grievances is that when they initially sought counseling for their gender-related distress, no one questioned them. Mental health professionals simply affirmed their gender identity and ushered them along a path of social and medical transition without exploring their reasons for wanting to transition or properly assessing their psychiatric comorbidities, trauma history, family dynamics, or internalized homophobia, and how all of these might play a role. As a result of this negligence, detransitioners now suffer mental and physical anguish daily, including pelvic pain, surgical scar pain, vaginal atrophy, infertility, inability to orgasm, inability to breastfeed, urinary tract infections, metabolic and endocrine disruption, permanently altered voices, baldness, unwanted facial and body hair, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disorders, and early dementia. All of these ailments place them at increased risk of depression and suicide. These vulnerable patients were victims of therapists who neglected their duty to ask questions, evaluate comorbidities, encourage self-acceptance, and support healthy long-term decision-making. Now they need help for complex psychological and physical trauma, but have very little trust in doctors and therapists. The existing law, ORS 675.850, already makes it difficult for parents to find appropriate help for their children. Parents contact me in anguish, stating it's been impossible to find a therapist willing to explore the underlying reasons for their child's sudden transgender identification. Adolescent therapists are afraid to ask questions for fear of being seen as, quote, trying to change a patient's gender identity, which under the current legislation could be deemed so-called conversion therapy and therefore pose a threat to their license. Even though gender exploratory therapy, asking questions and getting to the root causes, has nothing to do with the abusive tactics of the 20th century that have long been banished from the counseling profession. The things on the Wikipedia page if you look at conversion therapy. The evidence-based approach of watchful waiting, which gives teens time to discover themselves without making life-altering decisions, results in desistance rates approximating 90%, as the process of going through puberty, coming to terms with one's sexuality, and finding one's place in society naturally resolves gender dysphoria in the vast majority of cases without any need for medical intervention. The proposed amendment would make this situation worse by depriving vulnerable adults as well as minors of comprehensive treatment for the underlying issues, such as, for example, sexual trauma, which can drive the desire to be rid of sexual body parts that are associated with that trauma for some people. This bill declares a state of emergency, but there is no emergency of so-called conversion therapy happening right now in the state of Oregon. And you'll be hard-pressed to find... Sorry.
You're doing all right.
Oregon's true emergency is the lack of proper exploratory therapy, which is not the same as the conversion therapy abuses of the 20th century. Proper exploratory therapy for distressed, vulnerable young people. This legislation will make that worse. Please vote no on House Bill 2458.
Wow.
Brilliantly laid out. I mean, I think her logic here is very important and worth noting. If a child has trauma, something that's happened to the child that caused the child to go into that particular lifestyle, it's like we're not even willing to have a conversation about helping them navigate through that. We're just affirming them, and then it's like, oh, well, if you want to just cut your body parts off, go for it without even having any discussion on, let's get to the root of this issue.
I like her compassionate stance, because this is opposite of what the narrative is of how people think of conversion therapy.
Right. It, you know, she's just begging for, don't tie our hands from having a conversation with people and treating them therapeutically before you make a life-altering decision of mutilating your body.
Interesting to me, because I've seen the entire, it's like an hour and a half long session, and the proponents for the ban, they're so unaffected. They just blaze right through this, and it's so inhumane that they would think so highly of themselves but so less of anyone else. It makes no sense at all.
So let's say in the future somehow this does get passed and the Bible tells us to follow the laws of the land. Where do you think we stand as Christians, and even for Christian clinical psychiatrists or psychologists or therapists, how are they to proceed?
I think that we should clarify, though, if the Bible gives you a piece of information and the laws of the land give you a different piece of information, you're always going to go with the Bible over that if it's against your morality. And I think that mutilating God's creation is against what God is in the Bible. So at that point, I would not adhere to the laws of the land.
But interestingly, and I've been watching this for quite some time now, and it's happening in multiple denominations that have a loved one, a dearly loved, son or daughter or brother or sister who is campaigning in this fashion for LGBT rights in the damning of conversion therapy, and they begin to believe the lie that's being sold to them, and I call it Satan getting a 2-for-1 special. And so he claims not just the person that's being affected that's convinced of their own reality, but he grabs their loved ones as well and say, well, the Bible really doesn't mean what it says.
Yeah, it's once again attacking. I like that you brought that out. Once again attacking the validity of, the Bible saying, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and if you were, let's just hypothetically say, born in the wrong body, and the Bible tells you, I knit you together in your mother's womb, then whose problem really is this?
Right.
That's God's problem. And so this is a direct attack that goes back to the basics of, what we actually believe as Christians, and that is God created us in the image that He made us. Yes, we're broken with propensity. Yes, terrible things happen to people and we struggle through those. Maybe it wasn't our choice that our parents were alcoholics. You're going to maybe lean more towards alcoholism. That still doesn't mean that God created you as an alcoholic.
Yeah. I think that also attacks the identity of God and like His perfection, because if now you have a God who makes mistakes, then you can't trust Him with anything. You can't trust Him with your life.
That's right.
Because He's not all-knowing anymore. He made a mistake.
That's right.
So now we're having fallout from these damages, because there are people who have been coerced and affirmed by going and cutting off their body parts, and medical people who condone, how you feel, not the actual reality, but how you feel is going to drive what they're going to do. And there's a big money-making process in this from medical people. And so now the fallout is happening from people who have gone through this experience thinking this is what they wanted to do, only to find out in the long run this really was damaging and it's ruined their lives. And this next clip confirms that.
Dear Chair Nose, Vice Chairs, Goodwin and Nelson, and members of the committee. My name is Camille Kiefel, and we can all agree that conversion therapy that uses physical and emotional abuse is wrong. But what happens if you believe you're transgender because of trauma? What becomes a concern is the idea that any sort of exploration into trauma would be considered transphobic. I've come here today to share my story in hopes of preventing it from happening to others. In 6th grade, my best friend had been raped by her brother. I started to dress more masculine. Around 2010, I was presented with the idea that I could be non-binary in college. In 2016, I saw a therapist who affirmed my non-binary gender identity. In 2020, I saw 2 mental health professionals who signed off on a non-binary double mastectomy. What I needed was a therapist to tell me that there is no biological equivalent to a non-binary identity. What I needed was somebody to explore the discomfort with my breasts in relation to trauma, not to have them removed. I now live every day with a mutilated body because therapists affirmed my delusion. The reality is that therapists are working with an ideology that does not allow them to question gender identity, fearing that they'll be viewed as transphobic and engaging in conversion therapy. I've had 2 different therapists tell me, being gay is not a form of mental illness. Therefore, being non-binary is also not a form of mental illness. You must be non-binary. There's no biological equivalent to the non-binary gender in the human species. These therapists are not looking into disassociation from the body due to trauma. They're not thinking about this critically. I ask that you please don't pass the bill. Thank you for hearing what I have to say. I know you'll make the right decision.
You could tell how hard that was for her.
Extremely hard, but look at the reality of what happened to her.
Yep.
She had a friend that was raped. So naturally as a kid, that's a fearful thing to experience.
Yes, it is.
And so all of a sudden you'd be like, well, maybe he was attracted to her. So if I don't look attractive, that won't happen to me. Yeah. And then she goes, if I don't identify as a female, maybe a male won't do that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see these chain of events that happen that put her in that place. That trauma didn't even happen, like the rape didn't happen to her. All she was close enough to the person that was raped.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than dealing with her trauma and getting to the root of that, helping her overcome that, they just affirmed her and cut off her breast.
Yeah. It's like not every male is going to do that to you. You could become more confident in your body, in who you are with therapy, but now you're undervaluating or devaluating therapy itself and now making it criminal. That person's not going to be able to get help.
Mm-hmm.
She's not alone. There are multiple other stories like this today that have had mutilization taking place of their bodies, and it's irreversible.
Yeah, I think that's really sad is because you will have, like, kids are very impressionable, and you have the whole TikTok thing going around where you have these, you're in this echo chamber. And so it's sad that stories like these are not circulating. They're put under the rug or they're considered completely right-winged. And then it's like you're going to have a generation of sterilized children.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to regret that. There are decisions I'm happy I didn't make when I was younger because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was, like, how that would impact me in the future. And you're just going through trying to figure out who you are. That's something that everybody in life goes through.
And they sign their life away before the medical procedures so that there's no malpractice lawsuit that's even possible afterwards.
And I don't know if this has actually been written into law, but if I just went into the emergency room and I said, I don't really care for my left hand, and I'd like to remove it, I actually don't think you can do that.
They'll ask you questions for sure.
You have to get
ask
therapy first.
Yeah, they're going to direct
probably
you.
refer you to a psychological assessment, probably.
Right. But look at what's happening right here.
Yeah.
It's like there's
transgender ideology and just pushing for, we have to accept everyone, And
I think it's the sensationalism or really just the emotional aspect tied into it, because when you hear, oh, like the LGBTQ community, they're suicidal, they're depressed, they're this, and they don't like the body that they're in, then it kind of grabs hold of some people's hearts. Like, well, I don't want anyone to feel that way. Like, I'll do anything to make you happy. And I think that's kind of where some of it gets tied in. Then you do have the medical professionals who are like, I'm told to do this. I don't want to lose my job. I'm following orders. I'll do anything for the money.
As well.
Exactly. So I think it's hard for me to believe that everybody just like doesn't care. I think at some point, like you were saying, you have loved ones. I think at the heart of it, when you see people being oppressed, it really is hard.
Yeah.
And you want to respond to that kindly, and you don't want anyone to, just to feel like just oppressed and depressed, like you want to do something. So I think there could be a little bit of that at play.
for your viewership, which I think a great part of your audience is made up of believers and Christians, prayer is powerful. And we know, I keep reminding myself that this world doesn't go on forever. We know we're in the book of Revelation, very clearly as we see what's happening. Good has been exchanged for evil. And so I encourage people, don't give up on God. Recognize that we are living in a time where this was foretold. I hear people say today, wow, if Jesus doesn't come very soon, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom, because we've really come so far. But I appreciate exploring this, because now I think people will have more questions about, hey, what is all this contention against conversion therapy? It's worth fleshing out and exploring and making up your own mind about what you think is right.
So I think we can all agree that conversion therapy that uses abusive tactics is wrong, and no one here would condone that, agree with that. But as you can see, there is real evidence of people who need to have discussions, and that's what we're discussing here on the show. Is we don't want the door to be legally closed to even have a conversation. God is permissible. He allows us to engage in evil if that's what we choose, because God has free choice at will, and I believe that we need to extend that free choice to other people as well. It may not be a lifestyle that we agree with, but you have the right to identify as LGBTQ plus anything. That's the right that God has allowed you to have. And that's what we're saying is you can identify with what you need to identify, but we hope that you'll take a look at the evidence. We hope that you'll order your life after the Bible, and we pray that that door to change does not get legally closed. So if you guys like this video, please consider giving us a thumbs up. If you disagree with us, we want to hear it in the comment section below. Why? Is there something that we're overlooking, or do you think this was a fair and balanced discussion on this topic? And I believe that we need to push this out to as many people as possible. So the simple thing that you can do for us is just give it a like, share it with people, post it anywhere you think that this would bless other people. And thank you guys for your support of our ministry. Those of you that have joined us for the first time, we hope you'll consider looking at some of our other videos that we've created. And if you would like to support this ministry or even get to know Wayne and his ministry, you can go to knowhislove.org, and our website is littlelightstudios.tv. Prayerfully consider supporting our work as we move forward. We love you guys, and thank you that you stopped by. We'll see you on the next LED Live. There has been very few movies in the history of the world that have completely changed our world. And in 1999, a movie titled The Matrix hit the world stage.
These stories are often told and seen over and over again. Is it simply just to make money? Or is there something more nefarious behind it?